Rhizosorb is redefining what growers expect from phosphate fertilizer. Backed by data and built for performance, Rhizosorb helps reduce phosphorus losses, improve uptake, and boost ROI without increasing input costs. Join the next wave of growers switching to the next generation of phosphorus fertilizers by visiting phospholutions.com.
You're listening to Ruminating with RealAg, the podcast that chews on the latest in beef production, with your host, Amber Bell.
I'm Amber Bell, and this is Ruminating with RealAg. For today's episode, we're going to be talking with Sean Thompson, who's the Director of Technology Access Center for Livestock Production at Olds College in Alberta. Now, Olds College has a smart farm where they trial new technologies at farm scale. And some of the technologies they've been trying out are AI sensing technologies like water sensing, animal sensing. They've been trying out drone usage. They have been working with virtual fencing. So we're going to talk about all of this and whether some of this ranch tech is actually useful, or is it just expensive toys? So get ready for this conversation. It's a great one. Hi, Sean. It is great to see you today.
Hi, Amber. Great to be here.
So I got to see you at the Ag Smart event at Olds College, and great event. There was a lot of information there. Now, your role as director, what exactly are you doing there? And give us a quick picture of what Olds College is doing with their smart farm.
Sure. So my role is director of our Technology Access Center for Livestock Production. And what that center is basically where the livestock research arm or division within Olds College. We are funded federally through NSERC funding, basically to keep the lights on and to pay for my salary. But otherwise, we're securing research grants and working fee for service with companies to be a resource for the livestock industry. And so that can be doing some pretty innovative research, looking at technology, as we'll focus on today, but it could just be putting on producer events, training producers, fee for service work, doing testing purposes, or going on farm and actually advising producers or companies on certain things that we have expertise on internally. And so how that integrates with the smart farm is that the college has a smart farm as a whole, which is livestock and crops. Actually, our livestock research center was the first and kind of the impetus for the actual smart farm as a whole, where we received this valuable NSERC funding in 2016, and that led to discussions on the smart farm, including crops, which ultimately led to where we are today, where we're a fully functioning farm within a college, but with a very specific focus on farming smarter.
Right, and what does that actually mean, farming smarter?
The way we word it is using new technology, new management practices, new ways of doing things to collect more data, to do things more efficiently, to do things more profitably, essentially to do things with informed decision making and data informed decision making. So having the data to back it up and using technology for the most part to collect that data.
Which really ties well into this conversation today, because we're going to be talking about ranch tech. Now, what kinds of tools or systems come to mind for you when we start talking about ranch tech? Like, are we talking about drones, GPS, ear tags? Where do you go with that?
Could be all that. So it could be something cool and innovative like sensors, virtual fencing, drones. Or it could be a novel feed additive, something that you're feeding to make an improvement, or it could be a management practice. So it could be something like a different way to handle animals or a way to acclimate them to stressful situations, just to make them perform better, to be less stressful. So it could be the really fancy, sexy stuff, or it could just be a different way of doing something that people are already doing.
What are some of the top things that you guys are playing around with on the smart farm?
Well, there's lots. So I guess, again, keeping it specific to livestock side, the remote monitoring or non-invasive monitoring, that seems to be where a lot of the attention is being spent by companies. So that can be ear tag sensor that tells you information that you typically wouldn't know unless you were watching an animal 24/7. So based on accelerometers and those tags and how animals move to predict what they're doing at that one time. And that has implications on, is that animal grazing, or is it a lack of movement? Is it sick? Or is that a telltale sign of something else? Or based on what the algorithms are telling that sensor or that accelerometer, is that animal in estrus? So there's a lot of real world applications. Um, Virtual fencing is another one that's getting a lot of attention. Again, similar concept. You're doing things virtually, remotely, not having to be on site, and being able to utilize new technologies that are at a price point now where you can use them for that application. In this case, rotationally graze, and not necessarily need the physical infrastructure. And then on the, I'd say on the feed additive side, there's a lot of interest on a few different areas. One, improve feed efficiency. So how do you grow them faster on less feed? Methane inhibitors. Are there certain additives you can feed animals that all help to reduce their environmental footprint? And then even just testing, I guess, novel feeds that are maybe on the crop side, but you can't actually feed yet to animals until they get that approval. And so being a testing site for that, to generate that regulatory data for those companies.
That's got to be a lot of fun to be able to just, hear something going on and be like, hey, I want to try this.
Well, it is, and we honestly we look for that input from industry, and so yeah, I have a team that researchers that's quite passionate, and they go out and seek funding to support projects that they're interested in. But we also get direct input from our industry advisory board that's specific to our research center. We have a producer panel within the old college that also contributes and provides input on what we maybe should be based on an industry perspective looking at. And then just like myself, there's several others on the team that either have their own farms or they're connected through the industry, and they just have that network to know what's interesting, what are the main things that the industry is looking at, and why.
What are some of the reasons, and how long have you been interested in ranch tech?
Me personally, or the
You
college?
personally.
Well, I guess I go back to that farming smarter mentality. It's not to say current farmers are dumb, or that what they're doing is wrong. It's just now we have that technology that can better inform what they're doing on farm. I always liken it to, in the purebred beef industry, which I'm a part of, visual appraisal and confirmation were always and to some degree are still the main selection criteria.
Hmm.
But now we know that with EPDs and other data sources that the cow we're keeping because she looks the best, or perception is she raises the best animal, maybe looking at the numbers, she's not. And maybe a quiet natured cow that produces every year maybe doesn't always produce the most profit when you have another one that maybe isn't in your visuals or your peripherals, but she's doing the work and potentially consuming less, and the numbers are there that support keeping her around and keeping her offspring. Visually, maybe not so.
Right. Right. And how long have you been interested in this, and how long has Smart Farm been running?
So yeah, personally, decades. So the Smart Farm itself started in 2018, and that's really not to say we weren't working with a lot of the same companies we are now. It's just that was the push and the emphasis to really focus on smart ag. And really, I think we were probably the first in North America, especially, or for sure Canada, to be branded under that whole smart farm umbrella. And now you'll see a smart farm at every university and college that has an ag focus, or at least at a minimum a smart ag department or professor or some sort of smart ag representative or expert at these institutions.
Right. And we touched on a few of the technologies that are out there. I mean, there's a plethora. I feel like it's never ending. How have you seen ranch technology evolve in, let's say, the last decade?
Um, I'd say probably the initial one was just the incorporation of improved data record keeping systems. So
Mm.
herd management systems, better ways to better inform producers on production traits and economically important traits that really should be driving their decision making, and just easier ways and easier systems to collect and interpret that information. I think that's probably the first one. Another one, like I mentioned, was more of the non-invasive sort of, I guess, observation type of sensors and cameras, whether it's behavioral measurements or movements to predict physiological events like calving, illness,
Mhm.
estrus, those sorts of things. Um, and I guess really why this is possible is because I think I mentioned already that the cost for a lot of these pieces of equipment and technologies have dropped to a point where now it is feasible to look at this in a farm setting, not just in a like a human health or some sort of other engineering setting where costs weren't necessarily a factor. Um, and I guess really everything I mentioned is also driven by just the labor shortage. So the industry has been in the labor shortage for a long time now, and if you can save 3 hours a day by not driving to a pasture to check your water source or make a daily trip, once or twice a week trip, then that's inherently savings on labor and fuel. And so again, the labor component was a big one going back 10 or even 15 years.
hmm so one of the things that I find interesting, because when we've worked cattle, we've been out basically every day with them. Um, do you find that the behavior of the animals changes, or does it make it more stressful on the animals if you're not out there with them regularly?
I think it really depends. I think on the extreme, like your range cattle that you may drop off in the spring and pick up in the fall, like they're probably raised in a way that's just how they're managed, and yeah, the temperament wise and aversion to people, that's you're going to see that. I
Mm-hmm.
think where a lot of these technologies are maybe reducing um, your cow pasture checks to a couple times a week versus daily or few every once every few weeks, you're not going to see that big of a shift. You probably will see some impact, but you're not going to have the wild range cattle from implementing a water level sensor and doing something that extreme.
Right, right. And so how, oh, I'm gonna cut that piece. Trying to figure out where I am. There we go. So what are some of the biggest promises that you've seen tech companies making to ranchers right now?
I think so. So the obvious one is production increases. So you'll get an incremental increase in forage yield or growth rate by using this technology or product. Another one would be ROI, and yes, use our product, it'll help with this, and you'll be able to pay it off in X number of years by the savings you'll make. And then the other one, especially with the technology ones, are user friendliness. So yes, it's an easy system to adopt. It's an easy platform to input and to interface with. And that's honestly a big component for adoption, especially when you think of the average farmer age in Canada being north of 60. Um, Not necessarily well versed. You can't assume that they're well versed in technology.
Do you find a lot of those promises actually hold up in world scenario? Like, I'm especially that user-friendly interface. I always wonder about that because I'm fairly tech savvy and I made a mistake on Expedia just the other day that cost me a lot of money, right? So I wonder about that.
So the user friendliness one is probably one that isn't met all the time, and it's because the people developing it, like you said, are tech savvy or they're actually engineers themselves, and what they see as trivial may not be even for someone like me who works and oversees a research group focused on livestock technology. The other component is, well, maybe easy to use, but the interoperability with that and the three other platforms it's communicating with, that's the hold up. And yes, you can run that one, but it relies on these other three, and then you're constantly relying on support. So I'd say that's probably one. The other one I would say is um, the promise of a technology, a device, a product um, being validated or not being validated in a real world setting. And so what I mean by that is maybe there's a product and it's been lab tested or pilot tested and it's come out great, and now it's commercialized, but maybe that was done a bit too soon prior to like a larger scale scale up in the field, or at a minimum at a place like Olds College where it can be tested in a somewhat commercial setting before it goes into a 200 or 500 cow-calf pair operation. And so that's typically where you see those kinks get worked out. And ideally, those are worked out before they are commercialized and making it into farms.
Right. Are there any areas that you see tech consistently providing a return on investment or by saving time or money?
The remote monitoring, again, I keep going back to that.
Mhm.
Just simply reduce labor and reduce fuel costs. We know fuel is probably never going to be cheap again. And just if you can save yourself a trip, or if you can save yourself hours in a day doing something on the farm where a sensor or camera can be doing that for you, that's money well spent. And then the other one, I guess, some of these newer technologies, taking out the subjectiveness of, say, like pen checking, where you're relying on a technology, whether that's just visual, whether that's artificial intelligence, to be the thing that's telling you what's wrong or what's right with an animal. By taking out that subjectivity between pen checkers, between workers, even if they're working together in the same operation, that's consistency, and that's something that can really reduce your labor requirements again, but also save on misdiagnosing, for example.
What about electric collars? Because that's something that, I mean, when I first came into the industry, people were starting to talk about them. They were starting to test them a little bit. What has been your experience with some of the electric collars?
So you're referring to the virtual fencing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we are testing that Old College because of that huge interest generated by the industry, and so we tried to get our hands on them about 5 years ago, and the company we tried to source them from, they just couldn't commit to. They were inundated by the interest, and they just couldn't commit to a 100 collar work order or purchase order. And so we finally got our hands on a system now, and we've been testing it. I would say it's got a huge potential for the industry, and on a few different levels. So one, simply just increase land utilization. The ability to graze your neighbor's grain stubble from post harvest without perimeter fencing, without even that physical fencing requirement. And so, especially in years where there's droughts, that could make or break an operation. As well, just it's amazing how many producers still don't rotationally graze. Some of that is based on land barriers, so just topography of trees, it just doesn't work. Some of it is cost based, so they don't have the money to invest in cross fencing to make paddocks.
Mm.
So this has the potential to gain those producers who have maybe been holding out because of those reasons. It also means that maybe some producers are, rotationally grazing, and now they've been doing it, say, with low intensity, and now they want to ramp it up. And then that means in any other scenario, you're either going out and moving animals more frequently or adding more fence. So more
Mhm.
animals, more intense, smaller area, shorter time. If you can do that from your couch on your tablet or your phone now, it just makes it that much more realistic that you actually will.
Have they seemed like, because you guys have been testing those, right? Have they seemed to be reliable enough that you would use them without an actual physical perimeter fence?
I'd say we're getting there because we're still testing them. I don't know if the lead researcher on that project is there yet.
Mhm.
but I'd say they're close. So if you'd asked me 3 years ago, I'd say no way, minimum perimeter fence. Now I would say that, yeah, I'm almost comfortable enough to send cows out without a perimeter fence. It's amazing. You don't realize until you have a system like this how they are herd animals. So it should be inherent, but how much they like to graze together. So in our trials now, we don't even have collars on the calves. They stay close enough to their mothers that really you're seeing some overlap on the field margins where the calves are going that the cows can't, but it's very minimal.
You often see that with a one wire fence anyway. The calves will sneak under, and most
Mhm.
producers don't worry about it. Um, yeah, I guess that's probably changed a fair bit. How hard is the training aspect to the electric collars?
Yeah, very simple. So the caveat is there's always most likely going to be some cows that just don't get it.
Mhm.
Those are ones you probably have to remove from those applications. It wouldn't be fair to them, or you just hope that they stick with the rest of the cows and don't wander too far. Training, it's a matter of 2, 3, 4 days. Honestly, the biggest factor, as you can imagine, most cattle, as soon as you hang a giant necklace from them, they don't like it, and there's a bit of a rodeo leaving the chute. But in a matter of minutes, they've calmed down. So just the act of something swinging from their neck can be a bit of a learning curve. Afterwards, the actual training to the audible signal and then to the shock, it's almost immediate. It's like I said, within a couple of days, most of them have got it.
That's really cool. Have you seen any application use for drones on ranches that have actually been like useful and helpful to ranchers?
Um, so drones are probably one of the ones I would say that there's been a lot of hype around that hasn't seen a lot of traction yet. I think simply people hear drones and they get excited because it's a drone. But really, when you get down to it, I haven't seen a lot yet that would get me excited about drones. There are some companies that offer, say, infrared detection of animals in say treat or forest areas or rangeland, and that does serve a need. But I see that unless you're constantly always wondering where your animals are, that's like a once a year, twice a year at roundup, helping to locate on say rangeland. I don't see that much of a benefit just to be able to visualize where your animals are at any one time, or really even to be able to assess animals from a drone. You're gonna have to be nearby anyways operating the drone, so why not just
Mhm.
go out and do that? Where I do see some applications with drones is on the pasture rejuvenation side, and so there's some companies now that offer drone seeding as well as herbicide applications with drones. That could have some big implications on again topography that's just not conducive to even like a quad spreader or sprayer. Yeah, the tech has come a long way where a drone can fit a bag or two 50-pound bags of seed, and that can seed a fair bit of acres. And as you have a replacement battery, you could seed some large acreage in a short time with a drone.
Hmm. I've heard of some people herding their animals by drone, and my caution with it has always been, because I love flying, has been the idea that if I teach them to herd using it, I'm not going to be able to use it to monitor, to even take videos if I want to, right? So that's been always my like, I don't know if that's a great idea.
I would say it's almost the flip side. So what we've seen with cattle is cattle, the first time they see a drone, they typically do not like it. They'll run away just seeing something in the air. But what we've seen is they get used to it pretty quickly. So unless you have a quite a large drone or something hanging from it or some sort of noise, I don't think cattle would respect a drone for herding. I
Hmm.
know there's some Australian companies that use them for herding sheep, and they've had some success there where they play an audible sound of a dog barking to try to mimic that. But sheep and cow are two very different animals, and I think they just get acclimated to it too quickly.
Hmm. Yeah, I could see that for sure. And are there any gadgets, any pieces of tech that you've seen kind of on the trade room floor that you're like, I don't know that there's going to be a return on that?
Honestly, I'd probably go back to the drones.
Hmm.
There's a lot of drone companies or technologies that are tied to drones that, because it's a drone, they get a lot of interest. And maybe they do what they say they'll do, but in terms of ROI, I just, a lot of those, I can't see an ROI. I never see it benefiting in a way that would pay back even in 10, 20, 30 years.
Hmm. Right, that makes sense. Um, and how do you suggest ranchers weigh the cost when they're going out, they see some new technology that's out there. What would you recommend for how to figure out if that might actually make a profit on your ranch?
Um, Probably my first suggestion would be to talk to an applied research center like ours, because that's typically what we do. We take a lot of the questions and uncertainty out of that for producers. That's a lot of what we do. Is we're a testing site to look at all aspects and then disseminate that to producers to say yes, this worked and this was our estimated ROI, or no, this didn't work, this is why, or this worked, but the product support was terrible, and just weigh those options. So that'd be my first suggestion. Um, and then really you need to look at um, what objectives are you trying to. So even before you look at ROI, like, is the technology you're adopting, are you adopting it because it's flashy and cool, or is it actually helping you address a problem you have, or is it addressing something on your operation that isn't a problem? And if it isn't, then why are you investing the money in it? I guess when you're looking at ROI, it kind of takes out some of that and corrects for whether it is an issue or not. But yeah, it's really, are you investing in it because you were given a good sales pitch, or because it's flashy, or is it really something that is helping address a problem on your ranch? And then from there, then you can look at, okay, now where are all the areas, including labor, including time spent on product support, if it's a technology, like all those aspects need to be weighed into your ROI calculations, not just a quick metric in terms of pounds extra per animal or fewer days on feed, and all that needs to be considered.
Right. Do you have any examples of where a new technology had a rancher like recoup their costs very quickly? I'm thinking like smart waterers would probably, that's one that I've been interested in too, being able to know whether or not there's water in a trough.
Yeah, and that was going to be my first thing that comes to mind too, because like no different than my small 30 cow farm, like I am checking my water source on pasture daily. I don't
Hmm.
necessarily check my cows daily and do a herd walk, but I always check the water. If I had a sensor, or if I had implemented a sensor on my farm that could tell me, could flag when, say, there's a water issue or lack of water, then I potentially am saving a couple trips a week to the pasture. Again, a lot of these water level sensors, the two or three that we've tested here at Holmes College, they're a few $100s. It's not thousands. And
Right.
so even with a very modest monthly subscription fee, or if it works on a cellular plan with $15 a month, whatever it's going to be, like that can be made back in a matter of months.
Do some of those sensors, do they just, do you need a specific watering system to use them? Or can they just go to, hey, I'm using, an whole bathtub. I can put the sensor in.
The No, it could be your bathtub, Amber. The Yeah, a lot of the sensors and systems we've used, it fits on the side of any sort of trough or any sort of trough-like apparatus. There's more advanced ones that actually fit into like a flow meter on a pipe feeding a trough, and those ones are a little bit more expensive, more for like a cistern type of setup where it's holding water and just pumping it to the trough as needed, versus pumping from a water body.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's just anything that holds water. If you can put a probe or a sensor on it, that's all you need.
And have you seen any ranchers adapt tools that weren't originally designed for agriculture, like a bathtub, that ended up being like a really good fit?
Um, yeah, so I would say more on the company side, on the developer side, like there's a few different technologies that, um, for example, the floating islands that we tested as a phytoremediation system for retention ponds in the feedlots. That was technology that was adapted from the oil and gas industry for tailings ponds, for reducing and taking up heavy metals in those ponds. And we've seen those as promising devices, technology for retention ponds and feedlots. We get a lot of, say, engineering type of applications where it's being used in or by engineers and they don't know the ag industry and they have a friend or some connection to it, and that's how it gets considered for something like cattle or crops. Another one I think of is there's a technology out of the US where we're working with those developers, and their vibroacoustic technology was actually developed for the US military as a health diagnostic tool, which it works great. And now it's at a price point. Does it work for the livestock industry? And we've been in a few projects now with them, and the answer is yes, in terms of disease detection, pregnancy detection, and those sorts of things. I guess the other obvious ones are some of the bioinformatic, artificial intelligence ones. Um, you think of even like for COVID for infrared screening and in public spaces, in airports, that sort of thing. A lot of that technology was or could be adapted to livestock, and actually some of them I know of even in Alberta. There were some livestock companies that were supporting monitoring in airports during COVID, where they had a technology vice versa for livestock, and then they were found themselves busy with COVID monitoring. Um, so yeah, and then artificial intelligence. That's obviously one that facial recognition in people. We've seen that for years now, and good or bad, it's here. We've also seen it now developed for livestock to be able to detect individual animals with 100% accuracy, and then all the potential that comes with that in terms of health diagnostics, estrus detection, calving, those sorts of things.
Well, I think even on the forage side, one of the things that's hit me has been being able to use like iNaturalist, or to actually know, have a better idea of what's out there. Google Lens is really good. Like, yeah, that AI side, I think we're going to see a lot more of that open up in the future. So, how much of a role does rural internet or cell coverage play in some of this technology, and whether or not it's worth it? Because a lot of those rely on cell technology.
Yeah, I'd say that's honestly one of the limiting factors for adoption for a lot of these technologies is connectivity. So most of these new technologies, especially the remote monitoring, they'll rely on either a cellular network or some sort of LoRaWAN system, which again still relies on that cell connection to get the data from a gateway back to your computer, or the other ones are satellite, which even those aren't 100% bulletproof. But yeah, a lot of these technologies, they if you don't have cell coverage or if it's spotty,
Hmm.
again, I look at like the virtual fencing systems and how well they connect. Like that's a great technology that might not work for everyone, depending on where you are.
Do you think Starlink's going to change that up? I know rural internet has changed a lot with that.
It's funny, yeah, whether you like it or not, it probably will. And I draw on our experience from our current project where we're central Alberta, foothills, not even remote, I would say, and we have connectivity issues. And so one
Hmm.
of the solutions we're drawing on is, can we get a mobile Starlink system and use that? And I know there's a group out of BC, a rancher group, who are wanting to do work with us, and they've already adopted a mobile Starlink system just to help with coverage, knowing that in the mountains you don't always have great coverage.
Right, definitely. Northern Alberta is very much the same. Um,
Yes.
so we talked a little bit about the user interface and whether or not it's easy to use and how important that is. Do you find that a lot of these companies have gotten better when it comes to making more user-friendly interfaces?
Yes, yeah. And I would say it honestly it comes with experience and as they're developing these and ground truthing them and validating them, that's where they get that feedback.
Hmm.
Uh, as I said, the engineers and the programmers, what they see as trivial is often not, even for someone like me. And so they really put an emphasis on, yeah, making it not only easy to input data or to upload data or look at data, but how they then do that secondary interpretation. And so that's the second question always is, now that I have the data, what do I do with it? A lot of companies have made it into, say, performance indexes and done their own algorithms, or made it into say, a dashboard where it's easy to visualize, in, not to dumb it down, but in pictures and diagrams versus just charts and spreadsheets. So
Hmm.
that has definitely helped. But at the same time, that product support or that support from the company is key, because if there are going to be problems, to retain clients, you need to make sure that they're rectified quickly, um, and that your availability is not necessarily 24/7, but depending on some applications, it could be 24/7. We've seen some issues where international companies will come to Canada and maybe it's great technology, but when you need support and you're calling overseas, it's 3 a.m. there and no one's available. And so
Hmm.
that's again, a lot of companies they've understood that and they're now accounting for it. But those are some of the headaches that some of these early companies over the last 10, 15 years they had to address right away.
And I know some companies have gone towards using a chatbot, which I've had, sometimes that's great, sometimes it's really frustrating. Do you think that more of the tech companies are kind of realizing that ranchers really want to talk to a person?
I think so. Honestly, I would say none of the technologies that we've validated or evaluated have done that. It's always a
Mm.
person, or it's just simply we'll get back to you when someone's in the office. Because yeah, that's just a quick way to lose a customer, is if you get a chatbot that doesn't help them and they've wasted another 10, 15
Just
minutes
frustration.
talking to someone that they thought was a person and isn't.
Yeah, definitely. What questions should ranchers be asking vendors before they go in and purchase a new piece of equipment?
Uh, the first one would be, has it been field tested?
Mm.
And then secondly, if it has been, where? And so I guess the where is important too, because if, yeah, it's been tested in the UK, okay, does your sensor product withstand minus 30 degrees Celsius? And does it withstand that for multiple days or weeks in a row? We get a lot of interest from companies wanting to do a secondary validation where they've already tested this and it's commercialized in countries around the world, but not in a cold climate country like ours. And the other aspect is, okay, it works great. Again, in New Zealand or the UK, where it's everything's done in barns and it's very close to, say, Wi-Fi access. And okay,
Smaller
now you're doing this
acres.
in yeah, now hasn't been tested on a 4,000 acre pasture lease.
Hmm.
No, and then now you have to go through that and just the variation in topography in Canada, where you could see dips and hills even in Saskatchewan, Manitoba. That may be an issue, let alone the foothills in Alberta. Um, so that'd be the first things that I would check. The second would be the product support. So if I have an issue, who can I call and what's your availability? Is it limited or is it 24/7? And yeah, because inherently technology, there's always going to be some issue, no matter how much you prep or how much it's been validated. And farmers aren't always tech savvy. So can I call someone? Can they fix it over the phone, or do I need to follow their instructions, and just what does that look like? Because that may be enough to deter producers right off the bat.
Right. We also don't always work 9 to 5.
That's right. Yeah.
So would you say then if say someone's come in, they're like, yeah, I want to adopt this piece of technology, would you recommend trialing it on a smaller portion of the herd, whole herd? Yeah, do you go all in?
I think it really depends. If it's going to be a huge or a significant capital investment, then I would maybe suggest going small if you have that option. On the flip side, if it's something that you've seen or heard of or read that's been tested in your area, your climate, similar operation, feedlot, cow-calf, whatever, whether it's through Olds College, whether it's through a neighbor, and there's been those good testimonials, then I'd be a lot more likely to invest in it, all in, and not just on a small scale. I guess
Right.
it really depends on the application, but and how your farm's set up. If you have smaller paddocks and you can afford to test it on a group of heifers before your main cow herd, then that might be a good option. And I'd say typically most companies will have some sort of scale up pricing or subscription option where it could be tested on this group up to X number of head, and it's this price. If you want to expand, then it's this next level up.
Right, that makes sense. What technologies do you see on the horizon that might truly change the way ranching is done in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think initially, and I keep going back to it, but these remote testing technologies, like remote monitoring technologies, it's if you can get accurate feedback through a sensor, through some sort of device, and not have to be on site or not have to be even in the same country. If you can get it all through a cellular connection or a LoRaWAN connection, I think that's huge. Whether it's virtual fencing, something really extreme, or whether it's just a water level sensor, like as long as we have that connectivity and that confidence that it's always collecting the accurate data we need, that's like just labor savings alone. That could be one hired farmhand, or one vacant position that you weren't able to hire that you don't need to anymore. So I think those are important ones. I'd say there's some new technologies coming out in terms of how do you indirectly predict or measure feed efficiency. So feed efficiency is an obvious one. It's producing the same on less inputs or producing more on the same inputs. And then we know now that feed efficiency is directly linked to methane production. And so that's why it's receiving so much attention on the environmental side, but also on the production side. And that always impacts your profitability. There are a few technologies. So the main reason, or the main method of collecting and measuring feed efficiency now is actually collecting the feed intake data. So at Olds College, we have a tele feed bunk systems. You monitor individual animals. You get 71 days on tests, and then you have a feed efficiency value, and that's light years ahead of what's ever been possible. But that also comes with a cost, and the infrastructure that producers would need to do that on their own farm, it doesn't make sense. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. There's a lot of promising technologies out there now, whether it's infrared thermography, whether it's through genetic testing, where the accuracy and the way and how you do it is easy enough and feasible enough that producers could probably take this information and make decisions with selection of replacement animals. So I think that's another one that has a lot of implications. And then I'd say another one is some of these methane inhibitor feed additives. Again, not to put too much emphasis on the environmental footprint, but if you can add something to a mineral source or add a few grams of something to a TMR in a feedlot and drastically reduce the environmental footprint of the animals that you're raising, it's a small and hopefully inexpensive gesture from the farmer, which would make a big impact within Alberta, within Canada, globally, and help to address some of those public concerns that we get as an industry.
Which might not offer a quick return on investment, but could possibly promote longevity in the beef industry, do you think?
Yeah, and potentially it could come with subsidies or incentives initially to
Mm.
get people on board. But yeah, that's why I say it has to be a modest investment, because if you're spending $100 per head a year to get that reduction, it's probably not going to pencil out, and producers probably aren't going to do it out of the goodness of their heart.
Right, right. Are there any trends from the crop side of things that you've seen spilling over into ranching?
Um, I'd say a couple. So I always joke that the beef industry is probably a good 20, 30 years behind the crop side for technologies and innovation. A few reasons for that, but anyways, I think that's where we're at. But we are seeing just simply in terms of just data capture. And so on the crop side, there's a lot more there's a lot of data that they capture to make those decisions, whether that's through variable rates and soil sampling and just modifying your production practices. So just that's something as a beef industry we're starting to do more of it, just collect more data to make better informed decisions. And then I would say the other side is some of this NDVI imagery and some of the applications where that's being used a few different ways on the crop side, but that's a technology we've tested and helped to develop on the pasture side, where you can use imagery to predict forage consumption to help better inform your grazing movements in a rotational grazing setting, or to look at regrowth and know when an animal could go back on a paddock that has been grazed already once in the season. And it's correlated very well to like a rising plate meter and the data you can collect in ground truth. So I think that's another maybe different application, but similar remote, non-invasive monitoring potential in the beef industry.
The push for cover crops and winter feeding techniques and that I think I've seen a shift, I think, in more ranchers using it. Have you seen the same thing?
Yeah. Cover crops, I think, seen a lot of uptake in them, and partially it's probably saved a lot of producers in times of stress or in drought and heat stress, and especially when you do the multiple species, you're just um, improving the chances that something's going to grow,
Hmm.
whether it's a drought or the flood tolerant ones, depending on the year you're having. I think any sort of extended fall grazing option is good. Um, it just gives you that flexibility to in years of drought to start grazing earlier, or to have that stockpiled forage through the winter. And if you can't graze it all in the winter, then it's there in the spring. And I think that's been good. Yeah, cover crops is just that diversity. It helps with a lot of different aspects, soil health, biodiversity. Yeah, there's a reason why it's seen a big uptake. I think you can go too far in the other direction. There's 15 or 20 different species in a mix. I think that's maybe a bit too much, but the principle works.
Right. Why would you say that's too much?
I think I don't think there's a need. I think
Mm.
cost wise and even just, yeah, the competition between plants, it'd be interesting. And I'm sure the research has been done to look at in a mixture with 20 different species, how many of those 20 don't even germinate or don't survive with the competition. And if they don't, then why are they in the mix? I think a little bit of variability and diversity is good, because, like I said, in different weather patterns and climates and different years and rainfall variation, you're going to see some flourish and some not. but that's the main principle for that biodiversity and the changing up and having different species in a mix.
That makes sense. And if you had to choose one tech tool that you could implement on your ranch today, what would you use?
Um, Probably the water level sensor. It's probably one that I should because the cost is very modest. But yeah, that alone, even when you include the data charges for the 6 to 7 months a summer or fall that you'll be using it, it pencils out pretty quick, the ROI. Whether you're walking to check your water or driving and just hours in a day, like I said, most producers I've talked to, myself included, we don't necessarily feel like we need to check our animals daily, but you need to make sure they have water daily.
That peace of mind, definitely.
Yeah.
And finally, how can listeners connect with Olds College's Smart Farm? I'm going to redo that. And finally, how can listeners connect with Olds College's Smart Farm or see any of these tools in action for themselves? How can they reach you?
They can reach me directly, and my information is through our website, and that would be the other place to connect with us and find out what we're doing. So oldscollege.ca, and you can follow the links pretty easily to the livestock research webpage or homepage. Typically, what we do is we'll do a research project. We'll publish the results online either through a fact sheet or a full multi-page report. We try to incorporate not only a report showing the findings, but also that economic component to it. So looking at the return on investment. But we always include the contact info for our researchers. So not just me, but any of our lead researchers, research scientists, research associates, so that industry can reach out to those people directly and get firsthand experience on how things went.
Perfect. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Sean. It was great talking with you.
Great to be here. Thanks, Amber.
And that was Sean Thompson on Ruminating with RealAg.